Before I tell you what happened in my courtroom that week, let me say this. In 31 years on the bench, I have heard almost everything a human being can say when they think no one will ever make them answer for it. But I had never, not once, had a defendant look me in the eye and tell me she owned me, until she did. If you've ever wondered what actually happens in the seconds after someone says something like that, the real seconds, not the version you see clipped and captioned online, stay with me. And if stories like this are the kind you want more of, hit subscribe now, because I promise you this one earns it. I remember the file before I remember her face. Tara Collins versus Chloe Langford. Property damage, $78,000. On paper, it looked like 100 other small claims cases I'd handled. I had no idea, reading it over my coffee that morning, that by the end of the week, it would be the case people were talking about on the news. I could feel the room shift the second the defendant walked in. There's a particular kind of silence that settles over a gallery when they recognize a name, and Langford was a name everyone in that city recognized. Real estate, skyscrapers, the kind of family whose buildings you live and work in without ever knowing it. She came in like she already owned the room, which I'd later understand she genuinely believed she did. 27 years old, tailored cream pantsuit, a diamond bracelet that caught the light every time she moved her wrist. She had the walk of someone who had never once heard the word no and had it stick. When she sat at the defendant's table, there was a smirk on her face I recognized instantly. The smirk of someone who believes the whole proceeding is theater performed for their benefit, and that someone from their family is already writing the ending. I looked up from my file. Ms. Langford, I said, keeping my voice even, businesslike. You're being sued by Ms. Tara Collins for property damage amounting to $78,000. She claims that you and your associates vandalized her cafe following an altercation. Is that correct? She didn't even look up from her phone. Allegedly, she said, drawing the word out like a punchline for an audience only she could hear. I want to be honest with you about something. That single word told me almost everything I needed to know about how the next few hours were going to go. I've learned over 3 decades that the first thing a person says under pressure is rarely a mistake. It's a preview. Put the phone away, Ms. Langford, I told her. You're not at brunch. She glanced up, smiled, that faint practice smile, and slid the phone into her jacket pocket. Of course, Your Honor, she said, and even her politeness sounded like mockery. Across from her sat Tara Collins, early 40s, a simple blouse, tired eyes that come from years of worrying about payroll and rent. She wasn't glamorous. She didn't need to be. There was a quiet strength in the way she held herself, hands clasped tight, eyes burning with something steadier than nerves. Determination. I've seen that look before. It belongs to people who have very little left to lose, which makes them more dangerous than they know. I read from the file. It says here that Ms. Langford entered the plaintiff's business on the evening of March 21st with 2 companions. An argument ensued. Property was damaged, and you left without paying for the damages. The plaintiff states you threatened her employees and claimed your family owned the block. Do you deny this? Chloe leaned back in her chair, laughing lightly, like I'd just told a joke at a dinner party. Your Honor, this is a misunderstanding. My friends and I were at her cafe after hours. We might have knocked over a table. Accidents happen. I offered to pay for the damages that night, but she made it into a whole thing, probably realized who I was and decided it was a payday. You offered to pay, I said. I see no record of that. I didn't put it in writing. We were just talking. She shrugged. People like her love to exaggerate things when they find out a Langford's involved. I want you to understand something about that phrase, people like her. There is a particular kind of cruelty in dismissing a person's entire existence with 2 words, and I felt the room feel it too. A low murmur went through the gallery. Tara flinched but didn't speak. My pen stopped moving on the page. People like her, I repeated slowly, giving her the chance to hear it back. She smirked, entirely missing the invitation. I meant small business owners, you know, always looking for someone to blame when things go wrong. It's the same everywhere. I didn't respond right away. Silence, I've found, is often sharper than any retort I could offer. I let it sit. The tapping of my own pen against the file was the loudest sound in the room. Ms. Collins, I said finally, tell me what happened that night. Tara's voice trembled at first, then steadied as she went. She came in around 10:30. We were closing. She demanded coffee even though the machines were already cleaned. When my staff politely told her we were closed, she laughed. She said, "Do you know who I am? My family owns this building." When my manager refused service, she got angry. She knocked over a chair, then a display stand. We asked her to leave. She told us we'd regret it. The next morning, the front windows were shattered. I turned back to the defendant. "Did you threaten this woman?" She actually chuckled. "Your Honor, I might have said something out of frustration, but come on. You'll regret it is a figure of speech." "Do you have any proof you didn't damage her property after you left?" I asked. "Do I need proof to disprove something ridiculous?" she said, smiling lazily. "My family's lawyers already handled the police report. They found no evidence linking me to the damage, so I'm not sure why we're wasting time here." I felt the audience shift in their seats. Tara looked down, trying not to cry. I closed the file in front of me. "I'll decide what's a waste of time, Ms. Langford." "Of course, Your Honor," she said, voice soaked in mock respect. "I didn't mean to offend. I just think we should keep things efficient. I've got a lunch in Midtown after this." "You'll be late," I told her. The courtroom laughed softly, and I'll admit, some small part of me enjoyed that she didn't. Her jaw tightened. And then, this is the part I want you to really picture because it changed the whole shape of the day. Her ego, bruised for what looked like the first time in years, flared up right in front of everyone. "I hope you understand, Judge," she said, colder now. "My family are generous contributors to several city programs, including judicial scholarships." The bailiff's head snapped toward her. Somewhere in the gallery, someone actually gasped out loud. Even Tara looked horrified on my behalf. I leaned back slowly, keeping my face as unreadable as I could manage. "Is that so?" I asked, deliberately mild. "Yeah," she said, shrugging. "So let's not make this personal. This is just a misunderstanding. People like you deal with bigger cases." I think this is the moment most people watching later would say the whole thing turned. Not the line everyone remembers. That came a minute later. But this one. "People like you." She'd already used that phrase once against a woman who cleaned coffee machines for a living. Now she aimed it at me. I didn't move. I folded my hands and looked at her for 3 long seconds, and in a courtroom, 3 seconds of silence from the bench feels like an hour. "People like me," I said. She grinned, utterly oblivious to the storm she was standing in. "I mean, come on, Judge, you've seen my family's name on those donation plaques. We're basically keeping the system alive. We're all part of the same machine here." And then it came, the line that would end up on every news channel in the country by the following morning. "Relax, Judge," she said, casual as anything. "I own half this city. Technically, I own you too." A courtroom doesn't sound like the movies in a moment like that. There's no shout, no dramatic music, just a gasp, quick and involuntary, from a dozen throats at once. The bailiff froze mid-step. Tara's eyes went wide with disbelief. I said nothing, not a word. My face went pale, not from fear, but from the kind of stillness that comes right before real fury. You could hear the hum of the ceiling lights, and there she sat, grinning at the bench, absolutely certain she'd just won something, when in fact, she'd just handed me everything I needed. Before we go further, if you're the kind of person who likes watching arrogance meet consequences, don't scroll past this one. Subscribe now, because what happened in the next hour is the part nobody who watched it live will ever forget. I didn't move. My fingers rested lightly on the bench, my face blank, but I promise you, stillness can be its own kind of violence in a room like that. I looked at her the way you'd look at something grotesque you'd stumbled across by accident. When I finally spoke, my voice came out quiet. Quiet, in my experience, is far more dangerous than loud. "Would you like to repeat that, Ms. Langford?" She tilted her chin up, mistaking my calm for weakness, which people do more often than you'd think. "It's not an insult," she said, smirk widening. "It's just reality. My family's companies fund half this city. We sponsor your judicial programs. We build your courthouses. You're standing inside one of our properties right now." She actually gestured toward the ceiling, as if the building itself belonged to her personally. "So when I say I own you, Judge, I don't mean you personally. I mean the system. It all runs on Langford money." A murmur rippled through the crowd again. I heard Tara whisper, almost to herself, "My God, she's actually saying it." I kept my eyes on Chloe. "Ms. Langford," I said, each word deliberate, "this courtroom runs on something your money can't buy, truth, and you're about to learn how expensive lies can get." She wasn't listening, not really. "Your Honor, you're taking this too seriously. Let's be honest, you don't really think this woman has a case, do you? My family already handled the police report. It was dismissed. No charges, no evidence. This is just good TV." That line, more than the one before it, is the one that made something in me settle into place. I leaned forward, resting both hands flat on the bench. Let's clarify something, I said. This isn't television for me. This is justice. If you came here to perform, you're in the wrong theater. For the first time, her smirk flickered. I watched her glance toward her lawyer, who very studiously avoided her eyes. That's a tell I've learned to watch for. When a defendant's own attorney won't look at them, the defendant is usually the last person in the room to know how much trouble they're in. I opened the folder in front of me. You said your family handled the police report. I've read it. I've also reviewed the supplemental evidence provided by Ms. Collins. I turned to Tara. Ms. Collins, for the record, tell me exactly what happened after the incident at your cafe. Tara clasped her hands, steadying her voice the way people do when they've rehearsed a hard thing many times in the mirror. After she left, I filed a report. 2 days later, I got a call, case closed, insufficient evidence. When I went to check our security footage, the file was corrupted. I found out later one of Ms. Langford's employees had called my landlord, the same company that owns the building, Frau, and had the system replaced within 24 hours. That got my full attention. Are you saying your evidence was destroyed? Yes, Your Honor. And I have the email confirming that maintenance request. She handed the printed document to the bailiff, who brought it to me. I flipped through it. Langford Property Management, I read aloud, approved by Executive Operations. That's your family's company, Ms. Langford. She shrugged, trying to look casual, though I could see her shifting in her seat now. We manage thousands of buildings, Judge. I can't control every maintenance order. I looked up at her slowly. You just said you own half the city. So which is it? The puppet master who controls everything, or the clueless heiress who knows nothing? The gallery laughed softly at that, and her face tightened. You think this is funny? Do you have any idea who my father is? I don't care who your father is, I said, and I meant it. You've spent your life walking into rooms where everyone cared too much. I watched that land. She blinked, momentarily speechless, and for the first time, my silence wasn't working in her favor anymore. It was becoming her undoing. I know your type, Ms. Langford, I continued, keeping my voice low but steady, raised believing your name was a shield, that money could erase mistakes, silence truth, buy forgiveness. But this, I gestured around the courtroom, is the one room left where your family's money can't touch the floor. Tara's lips trembled. I heard her whisper, "Thank you," under her breath, and I turned to her gently. Don't thank me yet, Ms. Collins. Justice isn't gratitude. It's restoration. Then, back to Chloe. Your family's influence may buy silence, but it can't buy me. The difference between people like you and the ones who change, they learn to listen before they lose everything. She scoffed, still not understanding what was happening to her. You really think a lecture changes anything? This whole show is entertainment. You yell, I smile, the audience claps, and my father wires the check. It's all noise. You think justice is noise? I said. Then you've never actually heard it. The room went completely still. Even her own lawyer leaned back, silent, already looking defeated on her behalf. I flipped a page in my notes and let my voice settle into the tone I reserve for the moments when I need to be surgical rather than loud. You may believe you're untouchable, Ms. Langford, but every empire falls. And when arrogance builds the walls, they collapse from within. I've sentenced people who built nothing but excuses. You've built an empire out of them, she tried to interject. You can't talk to me like, oh, I can, I said, cutting straight through it. Because the moment you walked through that door, you stopped being a Langford. You became a defendant. And in this room, the only thing that matters isn't your name, it's your behavior. I let the gavel finish the sentence for me. We'll resume after recess, I said. And Ms. Langford, I strongly suggest you think about who really owns what. I'm told the whispers outside those doors had already started. Did she really say she owned the judge? Most assumed my quiet was shock. It wasn't. It was the calm before I took apart everything the Langford name thought it could buy. If you're enjoying watching that unravel, subscribe before we get to the part with the footage. That's where it really falls apart. When we reconvened, the energy in that room had changed entirely. The smug laughter that had trailed in with Chloe Langford was gone. She now slouched at the defendant's table, whispering furiously to her lawyer, her composure cracking, a tapping heel, a clenched jaw, nervous glances up at me. The bailiff called the session to order, and my gavel silenced even the smallest murmur. I was done tolerating arrogance. Ms. Langford, I began, keeping my tone deceptively calm. I trust you used the recess to reflect on your earlier statements. She forced a smile. Of course, Your Honor. I realize maybe I was a little blunt. My apologies if my words came across as disrespectful. I just meant people sometimes misinterpret confidence for arrogance. Confidence, I repeated, letting the irony sit in my voice. Confidence comes from merit. Arrogance comes from entitlement. Let's see which one applies to you. I opened the thick file in front of me. The sound alone, I've noticed over the years, tends to work like a warning bell in a courtroom. You claimed the police found no evidence connecting you to the vandalism. You said the case was settled privately. Is that correct? She nodded, relieved to be back on ground that felt familiar. Exactly. My family's legal team cooperated fully. Settled, I said slowly, flipping to a page. Interesting, because what I have here tells a different story. I held up a printed report. The original case was closed, not resolved, and 2 detectives assigned to it were later reassigned without explanation. 3 days after that, a check for $75,000 was deposited into the Midtown Police Pension Fund, donated by Langford Development Group. I watched the air seem to leave the room. Her face froze. Her lawyer's hand twitched toward the table, but I didn't give him the chance. Don't bother objecting. I verified the donation through public records. She laughed weakly. That's philanthropy, Judge. I leaned forward. Philanthropy that coincidentally appears 3 days after your case disappears. Do your family's charitable impulses always align so neatly with their legal inconveniences? The gallery murmured again. Tara sat clutching her hands together, and for the first time, I saw hope flicker across her face. Chloe's jaw tightened. This is ridiculous. You can't accuse my family of— I'm not accusing your family, I said. I'm examining your conduct, and so far it reeks of privilege and evasion. I turned to the bailiff. Bring in Exhibit C. He set a small flash drive on the desk. This is the unedited surveillance footage from Ms. Collins's cafe, obtained from her insurance provider, not her landlord. It was backed up to the cloud before the system was removed. I watched the color drain from Chloe's face before the screen even lit up. The footage showed a nearly empty cafe, tables stacked for closing. Then the door opened, and there she was, unmistakable in her tailored blazer, stumbling in, clearly intoxicated, gesturing wildly at someone off camera. Then the shove, the crash of a display rack, the sound of breaking glass. Her own voice carried through the microphone. My family owns this block. You'll regret this. The room fell completely silent, except for the sound of her breathing hard through her nose. When it ended, I looked up slowly. That was you, wasn't it? She swallowed. I was upset. They were rude to me. Stop, I said, and I let it crack like a whip. That's enough. I closed the file with a deliberate snap. You destroyed someone's livelihood because your ego was bruised, then hid behind your family's name. How much is your dignity worth, Ms. Langford? The price of a window, a wall, or the next person's silence? Her lawyer leaned forward. Your Honor, this questioning is perfectly within my rights, I said sharply. Sit down. He did. I looked directly at her now, my voice low but cutting. You came here expecting a performance, thinking your family's money could control the script. But this isn't a play. This is reality. And in reality, the audience doesn't clap for villains. They clapped anyway. Quiet, restrained applause from the gallery. I let it pass, then continued, softer now. Ms. Collins, people like this build walls to protect their reputations, not their character. And every so often those walls crumble. Today is one of those days. Tara nodded, tears brimming. Thank you, Your Honor. Chloe shifted in her chair, all her earlier bravado gone. You don't understand how this works, she said, quieter now. My father, he fixes things. He'll make this right. No, Ms. Langford, I told her, I will make this right. I let the silence sting before I went on. You've lived your life believing power means never having to say you're sorry. But here, power means responsibility, and you've shown none. I turned back to the file. Before we move to sentencing, I want to make something clear. You said you own half this city. Maybe you do. But today you're about to lose the one thing you can't buy back, your credibility. I remember watching her in that moment, the arrogant heiress who thought she could buy justice, slowly realizing she couldn't even rent it. Holding someone accountable isn't about anger. It's about precision. When I returned from chambers, the room felt heavier. Every eye followed me to the bench. My face was calm, too calm, the kind that always comes right before I take someone apart, and the air was charged with the knowledge of it. Chloe shifted uncomfortably, her swagger completely drained, looking smaller now, almost girlish under the weight of everything that had just been exposed. Ms. Langford, I began, keeping my tone measured and surgical. Before I deliver my judgment, I want to give you an opportunity to explain something. She straightened slightly, gripping the edge of the table. Your Honor, I think things have gone too far. I've already said I'm sorry. This was a misunderstanding blown out of proportion. I didn't mean to offend anyone. Wrong, I cut in sharply. You told a sitting judge that you owned her. You mocked a small business owner whose property you damaged. You used your family's money to bury a police report and called it philanthropy. And now you want to call this a misunderstanding, the courtroom murmured. She swallowed. You don't understand, Judge. My father expects me to handle things quickly. He doesn't like bad publicity. Bad publicity, I repeated, leaning forward. You mean consequences? I let my tone drop into that deliberate calm I reserve for moments like this. I don't work for your father, Ms. Langford, and I don't care how many buildings carry your family's name. What I care about is truth and respect, neither of which you seem to value. I motioned for the bailiff. Bring me the supplemental exhibits. He handed me another folder, thick, stapled, a blue tab marked confidential background. I flipped through it. My team did some digging during recess. It seems this isn't your first incident. She blinked. Excuse me? 3 years ago, disorderly conduct at a beach club in Miami. Charges dropped after a donation to the city's revitalization program. A year later, an altercation at a club in Chicago. Dismissed after the complainant withdrew her statement. Last summer, a hit and run in the Hamptons, settled privately. Do you see a pattern, Ms. Langford? Her mouth opened, then closed. For the first time all morning, she had no words at all. I'll tell you what I see, I continued. A person raised to believe laws are for other people. The product of a system that rewards wealth and punishes honesty. And the end of that illusion, right here, right now. Tara sat frozen, tears glistening. The gallery was silent, fully absorbed in watching justice take its actual shape, not the version they'd expected. Chloe tried once more to regain control. Judge Marsh, with all due respect. Don't you dare say with all due respect, I snapped. You've shown none. You think money gives you power, but power without character is corruption, and corruption always meets its reckoning. Her lawyer whispered frantically at her side, but she ignored him. You're making an example out of me, she said, desperation creeping into her voice. You can't humiliate me just because people want a show. Oh, make no mistake, Ms. Langford, I said. I don't humiliate people. They humiliate themselves. I just hold up the mirror. The gallery applauded again. I waited for it to settle, then turned back to her. You said earlier you own half this city. Tell me, how much of it will you own when your reputation is gone? When your father's investors see how his daughter conducts herself on national television? Her face turned pale, her voice trembling now, all that earlier smugness gone. Please, Judge, you don't understand what this will do to me. What this will do to you, I said. What about what you did to her? I gestured toward Tara, whose voice cracked as she whispered, She ruined everything I built. I set my hand down on the bench, not in anger, but in something more deliberate. You came into a woman's business, destroyed her property, mocked her, and then buried her case under money, and you have the audacity to stand here worried about what happens to you? Her lips parted, nothing came out. I softened my voice, but let it carry more weight than any shout could. You think you can buy respect. But respect isn't for sale. You can't purchase dignity. You can't lease humility. You can't invest in decency. Those things have to be earned, and you've earned none. The room went completely silent again. I closed the folder. You said you own this city, but here's the truth, Ms. Langford. The city doesn't remember who owns its buildings. It remembers who builds them with integrity. And right now, all you've built is a monument to shame. I leaned back. I've seen hundreds of defendants come through this courtroom, thieves, liars, manipulators. But very few have managed to disgust me. You, Ms. Langford, just join that list. If you've made it this far, you already know what kind of person doesn't just shrug that off and move on. So stick around for the ruling, and don't forget to subscribe. This is exactly the kind of accountability we like to document. The gavel struck once, loud and final. I'm ready to deliver my ruling. The gallery leaned forward, breathless. Tara wiped her eyes. Chloe sat frozen, staring at the table as if the wood grain might open up and swallow her. The empire behind her name had always been her armor. In that moment, it felt more like a coffin closing. I adjusted my glasses and spoke clearly. For the record, this court finds in favor of the plaintiff, Ms. Tara Collins, and against the defendant, Ms. Chloe Langford. But the damages I'm about to announce aren't just financial, they're moral. Ms. Langford, I continued, you came into this courtroom believing money would insulate you from truth. You treated this proceeding like a publicity inconvenience, not a matter of justice. But justice has a long memory, and she does not care about your lineage. I turned to the bailiff. Read the damages. He handed me the papers. I looked directly at her as I spoke. You will pay Ms. Tara Collins the full cost of her property damages, $14,600, as well as an additional $25,000 in punitive damages for malicious destruction and intimidation. Furthermore, I am ordering a formal referral of this case to the District Attorney's Office for review of potential interference with evidence. Her mouth fell open. You can't refer me to the DA. This is small claims. It stopped being small, I told her, when you started bribing your way through life. The gallery gasped. Tara pressed a trembling hand to her mouth. I kept going, unwavering. You thought saying I own you would intimidate me, but it exposed you. You've mistaken wealth for power, and power for immunity. What you actually own, Ms. Langford, is your behavior, and your behavior has consequences. Her lawyer stood abruptly. Your Honor, we will be appealing. I cut him off with a glare. You're free to waste your client's money, counselor, but make no mistake, the record is permanent, and the footage you just saw will live forever in public archives. The crowd chuckled softly, then went quiet again when I leaned forward. My voice lowered, not in anger this time, but in something colder, disappointment. Do you know what offends me most? It's not your arrogance. It's that you've had every opportunity, education, privilege, connections, and you've used them to make the world smaller for people beneath you. You had every advantage, and you chose corruption. Her face was pale, her voice thin. You don't know what's expected of me. My father doesn't tolerate mistakes. Then maybe, I said, he raised a daughter who doesn't know how to face them. That line struck like a blade. The courtroom stayed frozen, but for the faint hum of the air conditioning and the creak of her chair as she slumped back, defeated. I stood, which is not something I often do mid-session, and I felt the shiver that sent through the room. When I spoke again, it wasn't for the record anymore. It was for her. You told me you owned me, but now I want you to look around this room and tell me what you really own. Not the building, not the cameras, not the people. What's left, Ms. Langford? Because from where I'm standing, all I see is a woman whose wealth can't buy her a single ounce of respect. I let my tone soften slightly, though it stayed sharp. Let me give you a piece of advice your father never will. The higher you build your life on arrogance, the harder it collapses when truth catches up. And today, truth just called in your debt. Her eyes glistened, though she tried to hide it. Her jaw clenched. You think this changes anything? The media will forget. My father will fix it. I leaned in. Oh, they'll remember, Ms. Langford. They always do. You'll become the cautionary tale at every dinner table that whispers your last name. You'll be the face people point to when they say, that's what happens when you think you can buy the world. I lifted the gavel but didn't strike it yet. I let my words slow down, deliberate, heavy. You told me you own everything, but after today, you'll learn what ownership really means. You own this verdict. You own your disgrace. And you own the moment you looked a judge in the eye and declared yourself untouchable only to discover you weren't. I brought the gavel down, thunderous, final. The courtroom erupted into a low hum, half applause, half stunned silence. Tara Collins burst into quiet tears, months of fear finally breaking loose. I gave her a small nod, the kind I reserve for the people who survive something ugly with their dignity still intact. You did well, I told her. I fought back, she whispered through her tears. Thank you, Your Honor. I didn't think people like her could ever be held accountable. They can, I told her gently. But it takes someone brave enough to stand their ground. You reminded her, and everyone watching, that truth doesn't bow to money. I turned to the bailiff. Escort Ms. Langford out. She stood slowly, and the arrogance that had clung to her like perfume that morning had been replaced by something else entirely, real fear. As she walked past my bench, she glanced at me, lips parting as if to speak, but nothing came. It was the first flicker I'd seen of a woman realizing her empire could crumble in a single afternoon. I'm told the gallery whispered in disbelief as she exited. The phrase "I own you" had already begun taking on a new, ironic meaning, one that would explode across the internet within hours. By the next morning, the clip had gone viral. My stare, her defiance, the sentence that stripped her of everything money couldn't buy. Headlines called it "Billionaire's Daughter Humiliated in Court." I never loved that framing. It wasn't humiliation for its own sake. It was accountability, finally landing somewhere it never had before. Here's what I want you to take from all of this. The legacy of that afternoon wasn't entertainment, even though it traveled the internet like entertainment does. It was a plain reminder of what happens when arrogance collides with accountability, and even the richest family's daughter learns that respect isn't inherited. It's earned, one decision at a time, and it can be lost the same way. That evening, alone in my chambers, I didn't feel triumphant. I felt something quieter, closer to relief. I don't do this job for applause. Justice doesn't need to be cheered. It just needs to be seen clearly by the people it's meant to protect and by the people who think they're above it. That day, in that room, it was. Court is adjourned, I said quietly. The gavel struck one final time. If this is the kind of story that keeps you coming back, real accountability, no shortcuts, no one above the law, no matter what their name is on a building downtown, then subscribe because there are more cases like this one, and I intend to keep telling them exactly the way they happened. Thank you for sitting with me through this one. I'll see you in the next courtroom.